we are talking about what Ifa really teaches about sin, evil forces, the afterlife, things like that. So I've been getting a lot of questions along these lines, and I wanted to compile them into one comprehensive episode so that we can really dig into this topic and understand it from a holistic perspective. Guys, if you are watching live, feel free to go ahead and drop any questions or reflections that you have in the chat window as we go along. Likewise, for those who are watching the replay, let me know if anything stood out to you. Let me know if you have any additional questions beyond what we covered here. And I will definitely try to get to you in the comment section on YouTube because it'll be available on YouTube and then Spotify later on. So, greetings, and welcome everyone. Greetings, Renoverse. Thank you for showing up, for joining us. So, wow, you guys are coming in too. So, greetings again. So I want to start with the survey that you guys did, the ones of you all who accessed it on YouTube, and the question was, what do you believe happens after death? Greetings. Is it SB 25th Street? So you're new to the channel, want to learn more? Ashe, you are very welcome. So yes, going back to the survey results. What do you all believe happens after death? So about 88% of you all said you believe that the spirit joins the ancestors. Some of you all say that the soul goes to either heaven or hell, similar to the Christianity belief system. 6%, did I say 6% before? Did I say 66? I meant 6 if I said 66. So another 6% of you all said that the soul reincarnates immediately. And then nobody believed that nothing happens, that life just is, which is good, right? And so things kind of coincide and flow with the beliefs in a traditional practice, especially that 88% of y'all believe that the spirit returns to the ancestors. So we're going to dig into that topic as well as so much more related to this subject matter of sin, hell, the afterlife, Satan, the devil, all of those different questions. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Greetings, everybody who is joining us, who has come along. Greetings again. So we're going to start with evil views on sin and evil. What does that look like according to the Yoruba belief system? So there's no true concept of what you would call sin or evil in the same way that we look at it from what people look at it from a Christian perspective, that if you commit this atrocity that you're doomed, that you're going to go to hell, or that you have to go through so much penance even on earth to repair that, and you're just kind of put in this kind of prison, this moral prison, so to speak. Even when we go back to the original Christian beliefs, if you go back to that word sin, the original meaning actually meant missing the mark. It wasn't this condemnation in the way that is portrayed in today's world. So it was just basically you're not on the straight path, and you need to get back realigned. And that's kind of the way we look at it in the Ifa tradition. Okay, it's understood as an imbalance, like you're engaging in some type of behavior that's dishonorable, that's outside of Iwa Pele, and you need to be back into alignment, right? Obviously, there can be consequences for you getting out of alignment because there is a way to go. Like everybody should be focused on their destined path, and likewise, just walking in Iwa Pele. That's for every individual on earth. But you're not relegated to, like, if you don't do this perfectly, then you got to walk around in guilt and shame and things like that. Instead, this notion of what you would call the equivalent or something comparable to sin in Christianity is referred to as Ise. I may be mispronouncing that, but it's basically considered like an offense or a transgression, an affliction, right? That does need to be corrected. So I'm not saying you just go out there and do whatever you want to do, but it's not this hardcore you are forever and eternally just condemned if you commit, especially certain sins, right? In Christianity, there's this notion that if you are involved in certain types of activities or lifestyles, like if you murdered somebody or you've what are there's 7 deadly sins or something like that, greed and so forth and so on, that you are forever punished and condemned to the lesser portions when you transition from this earth. So that, in other words, you would go to hell. And that notion isn't prevalent in E5. So Isai can also refer to personal wrongdoing, what you do, but also external affliction. So from evil or malevolent forces that can also come through people. So somebody can come through and afflict you with a curse or something like that and cause you some issues in your own life. But there are ways that you can also cause issues as well. Even so, when somebody is allowed to come in and truly deeply penetrate you with the curse or what have you, that is a strong indication that you're walking out of Iwa Pele. So you've opened up that door as well for them to be able to penetrate you in some way. And there can be a multitude of ways. Obviously, through you walking outside of Iwa Pele, outside of your destiny, so violating taboos and warnings and not walking in gentle character holistically. And this is whether you know or you don't know, a negative mindset even towards yourself. You know, you're already saying negative stuff against yourself, and that's outside of Iwa Pele. That's outside of destiny alignment for everybody, right? It's not just, um, some people. Every single body should be walking in that path of their destiny alignment. So I have a question here on Instagram. You said, I think to believe you can be punished for eternity causes major mental issues. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Even so, in my own life, like I suffered there so many years dealing with Christianity. Just always feeling like, well, did I commit a sin? Am I guilty? So it was like this back and forth cycle of always just trying to be right. And anytime I did anything that was, that I thought was wrong or that I thought was a sin, or if I offended anybody, I would get like so anxious, like I'm not in alignment, I'm not, walking the right way. Is God gonna punish me? Is Jesus gonna do this? So forth and so on. And it's meant to do that, right? It's meant to keep you in this perpetual state of guilt and shame, because that way you just keep on feeding that energy of this, Jesus, this savior type of figure, right? You're saying, do you have any worship place or community in Toronto, Canada? I do not personally, but thank you for that question. I don't know anybody who does. I know it's not a lot going on in Canada as far as the tradition. I'm sure it's there in certain pockets, but it's not as expansive as we see here in the U.S., unfortunately. But it's growing. You're saying that's why some people just go back. They get tired of watching their back. 100%. I agree. Like some people are just like, I would do what I want to do because, I just can't keep this straight line. Even so, there's this notion like if you die in your sin, you're going to hell. What does that look like, right? So it's so many conundrums, in my opinion, in that system. I got tired of that myself. But moving forward, good and evil are better defined as balance and imbalance in the tradition. So good is usually, you're somewhere in the middle. Nobody's going to absolutely be perfectly in the middle with everything all the time. But you want to be somewhere in the middle because everything is a spectrum. Even the Orishas, those are elemental forces. They're along a spectrum, right? You have love on one hand with Oshun, but you also have jealousy and envy on the other hand with Oshun. So we want to be somewhere in the middle. We don't want to be too loving, and we, just giving our all and being taken advantage of. Likewise, we don't want to be jealous or envious at all because that's not a good trait. It's not gentle character in either way. We want to be somewhere aligned in the middle, right? So good That's the equivalent of living in alignment with your destiny, with cosmic order. So everybody has their own destined path to take. You want to stay within that destined path, especially when it comes to things like maintaining your taboos, your warnings, living life according to where you're supposed to live. Some people are even working in professions or occupations that they're not supposed to be in. And I'm not saying even just like something like prostitution or selling drugs or something like that. I mean, even professions that would be considered to be good in the eye of the world, of society. So, for instance, somebody could be a medical doctor, could be saving lives, but that's not where they're supposed to be. And so they're out of alignment with their destiny. So that could be part of it as well. And then, of course, cosmic order. We're staying within the boundaries of the way the world operates. We are aligning with nature. We are making sure that we are balanced out there. We're not going outside and destroying nature and expecting our lives to be good and there to be no consequences from that. Got another question here. You said, can you clarify your understanding of Ajogun, and are there any deities specifically associated with it? Yes, I'm going to get to that. Thank you for that question, and I have it outlined, so I'm going to get deeper into that concept as well. So, evil, though, that's considered intentional, mischievous deeds designed to cause harm or ill will. So, obviously, all of us have mishaps from time to time. You're going to say something to offend something. You're going to say something even against yourself sometimes, like, I messed up, and things like that, where you're going to get out of alignment. It's one thing when those types of things happen, and it's another thing when you go out and intentionally try to cause harm against other people or even so yourself. That is what we call evil. And obviously, that is not rewarded in the least bit. So, how does Ifa protect us against evil? I got this question from someone before the episode. So, Ifa protects us through revealing, right, those forces that are against us. Anytime you get an Ifa reading, you are going to get information about what's going on in your path, how to circumvent any type of negativity or any type of adverse events or things that may be coming into your life. So you're told ahead of time, this is coming up. Be careful here, right? You're also going to get those remedies, or even so, I should say, something is already going on in your life. But you'll also get those remedies. That's the sacrifices, the elbow, the akosha, the spiritual medicine. Even so, taboos might come up, like you shouldn't be involved in this. Don't go out at night after a certain time, for instance. You should not wear red. You should wear white most of the time. Those types of things, right? Warnings can also come up, which are akin to taboos, but they're not the exact same. So these are the ways that Ifa protects us. Obviously, you are always going to get continuous protection. And another way too is by going ahead and always maintaining like some protection on your person. So like the Lakis, these aren't Ifa. This is a combination of Eshu and Yami. But you can get any type of election to protect yourself against negative spiritual forces. Also, the Akoshe and things like that, as I already mentioned. But you can maintain those things on a continual basis, especially like the Elekis and the amulets and charms and things like that. So I got our Odessa. Thank you for joining us. Greetings. So those things are also possible so you can stay in protection. And obviously our spiritual forces are always protecting us. It's not like you're without protection. However, we all need it at a higher degree, but especially if you have a certain destiny path, if you're working in certain occupations, the more public facing you are, the more challenges that you're just naturally going to have because more people are seeing you and interacting with your energy. Now we're going to transition to looking at Ifa views on Satan, what you call the devil, right? So there's no such central force or character in the tradition that is responsible for all evil. Where you can say, "Oh, the devil made me do it." There's no such thing. There's no such belief pattern in Ifa that this particular force exists. Now, evil forces do exist, and you asked about that earlier. It was SSCCO, and I'm going to get to that as well. But those are entities, those are forces. It's not one central force that's even over all of these other forces and orchestrating every bit of evil that we see in the world. Okay. So you don't have that excuse to just be like, the devil made me do it type of energy. All righty. So, greetings, alien black girl. Thank you for joining. So going back to it, the tradition does acknowledge that there are absolutely constructive and destructive forces, and actually it creates a natural balance. It's kind of like the concept in the Chinese philosophy of yin and yang. There actually has to be that balance of, that good and evil. I'm trying to kind of do this sign or what have you, of yin and yang. So there has to be that balance of forces. The goal again is for you to stay in that between line, to stay on the middle of the spectrum to maintain balance, right? And once you're doing that, for the most part, you're going to be okay. It's not like, oh, I just walk and I do everything good and I'm completely protected. No, because evil forces are always going to try you. The more actually you try to walk good and do good, the more you're going to be tempted and tested, because those forces want to get you off balance. Ashe and greetings to everybody, Alafia to everybody who is coming in on both platforms. I see you guys on IG. So people confuse, though. They confuse issue with Satan. We see this a lot in posts and things like that. I personally feel like way too much attention is given to it by traditionalists to try to always say issue is not Satan. It is needed to a certain degree, but we shouldn't always be trying to explain ourselves by our tradition. It's either like you come to the tradition, you accept it, you embrace it, or you don't. Nobody should consistently be trying to prove that issue isn't Satan. But just to give my spiel here, because I was asked about these dynamics, this is a confusion, right? Because of the colonial era, missionaries teaching that, um, you know, issue is Satan. It was just a corruption, a demonization. It was written, I forget what the text is, and they took it and ran with it, and now they consistently say this in Western context that issue is not the devil. If you really go and you look and you do your research, you'll understand the essence of issue. And I'm going to get to who issue is shortly. You're asking here, you say, is there an Orisha who is associated with controlling Ajogun or working with them to not cause destruction? So there's no Orisha that's like just controls them all together. All Orishas are helpful in controlling them. It depends on which ones are trying to attack you and how they're trying to attack you, and the time frame. So when you go and get a reading or what have you, and it says that you have, certain forces walking against you or working against you rather, it'll tell you which Orisha you need to feed in order to get help with that. Now, I can't say definitely Iyami will work. Iyami and Issue at some level will work heavily in those areas, but sometimes you might need to feed Ogun, right? Because Ogun is very, very helpful as that warrior spirit, but it could be another energy. It really depends on how they are reaching out trying to attack you. So it's not like, again, one central force, even from the Orisha end, that this is the only Orisha that's protecting you against those evil forces. Okay. So going back to what we were talking about with Eshu. So Eshu, that's that divine messenger. All messages, all understanding, knowledge, and wisdom is going to come through Eshu when we go and communicate with the Orishas and give offerings and things like that. So that's what Eshu is about. Eshu also enforces divine order, enforces that balance. So if you do wrong, you are going to receive punitive measures for that. And when you do, you might look at it like as if it is evil, but it is not. Eshu is also known as like this trickster spirit. So Eshu sometimes tricks people, but is for their own good. It's to teach you wisdom. It's to teach you a lesson. And so again, some of his tricks, some of how he punishes can look evil, but it is not by any means evil, right? It's even so like when people talk about the devil in Christianity, a lot of times people are really just getting their just reward, but they don't see that, right? So they don't see the things that they did in the past is coming back around to them in another form, but they're experiencing hardships in their life, and it's all of a sudden, well, the devil is trying me, so forth and so on, when it really could just be usually is just their deeds coming back around to them, but they're not getting that message. You're saying here, I see what you're saying. Yummy will fight for you relentlessly. Absolutely. Absolutely. They will. They constantly fight for you, but they'll also punish you too. So you get on their, I won't even say bad side, but if you get into that space, because the yummy are the mothers, it's just like your mother in real life, right? So you're a good mother. I'm going to say that, not the type of mom that like just everything their child does is okay, it's good, and so forth and so on, because some mothers are like that. But a good mother is going to nurture and take care of her child and teach them the right way to go. And when they do well, they're going to be over them, providing for them, protecting them. And when they do wrong, it's not that their protection, they remove their protection. Instead, they give a certain level of punishment, because that punishment is actually a form of protection, right? So when you are punished for your misdeeds, you can then receive the protection. You can receive the correction that you need, which serves as a form of protection, so that you don't go back and do that in the future. Right? So that's what all of those things are about. And that's what Eshu's role is to maintain that balance by enforcing consequences for misdeeds. Same with Iyami. I'm discussing Eshu specifically here just because of his, unfortunate connection to being the devil or Satan or what have you in the tradition. So moving forth, as far as teachings on evil forces and dark spirituality, and we're going to get to that notion of the Ajogun here, right? While we don't have that notion of a devil, that central force in the tradition, it is conceptualized within the tradition the notion that there are evil or malevolent forces known as the Ajogun. They do exist. These are forces, right? And they represent specific types of types of what we would call evil or what have you, such as misfortune, right? The death, the diseases, the loss, the conflict, things like that. Those are forces of evil that get us off balance. Even so, right? The notion of death, the physical death, even though it's inevitable in everybody's existence, it is not something that most people truly want to experience. Even people who take their own lives, usually they don't want to experience death, but they see it as the only means to an end for whatever they're suffering or going through. But most people don't want to truly die, no matter how hard their life gets. Let's take a few questions or comments. So, greetings, Samantha. Thank you for joining. Alien Black Girl, you said, yes, currently learning lessons from SU. I have to be obedient. Absolutely. All of us. It happens to everybody. Like, you're going to get corrected. So that's the reality of it. You're saying here, I know I'm asking a lot of questions. You're good. Thank you for your questions. I love questions to help us guide the conversation. You saying in Look at Me, you can see multiple issues who are seeming to, I guess, be like separate entities almost, but in Isheshe, it is more so seeming to be separate titles to describe the same. Yes, it is. You're 100% correct there. it's the same entity, it's just different aspects of that entity, right? So it's issue, but in one manifestation, issue is protecting and guiding. In another aspect, issue may be teaching lessons and showing you different what do you call it, logistics and things like that, right? So that's how that looks. And it's, you can kind of think about it like us, right? Like you might be a parent, you're definitely a child, right, of your father, your mother. You might work, you might be a leader in your workplace, you might oversee some kind of community event, you may play for a community team or something like some kind of sport or what have you. Those are, this all you, one person, but you're gonna manifest differently in all of those different functions, right? So you might show up in one place and you can act a certain way, and then you go into another environment and you could act to or seem like a completely different person. And somebody that knows you in one environment and they happen to catch you in a different environment, they're like, wow, you're so different here, right? We all do that from time to time. Some people do it more, is magnified more so in certain people, particularly Geminis. No, I'm teasing. So if anybody here is a Gemini, don't get mad at me. But y'all do change up. Y'all switch up on people from time to time. But so you do see that. Even so, I was just having this conversation earlier this morning about, people changing up on their job versus how they act in the home, right? And the discrepancy there is obviously you go to work and for one, you got to answer to your boss. You want to make money, you got to answer to your boss. You have to act a certain way. And some of it is also just natural. It's not all just, I'm just code switching or what have you. But, we as, you said it too, Alien Black Girl, you put it up there, code switching. Yeah, sometimes not sometimes, we do have to do that as Black people quite often. But sometimes it's just natural. You just naturally adapt to your environment. And so that's a very similar thing that we see like with the manifestation of issue, and also other Orisha have the same essence as well, right? Because we see Oshun as, this loving entity that provides luxury or what have you, but we can also see Oshun in her manifestation as a jealous force. All right. You're saying too, you're a Gemini. Sorry. Gemini, but y'all know y'all can switch up on people. So let's see. You say, how does Ifa handle the integration of Ajogun as elements of ourselves, as within, so without principle? Is it about casting out or developing understanding and integrating these aspects of self? Also, Alafia, and thank you for this. You are very, very welcome. And that's a good question. So Ajogun aren't really aspects of ourselves in that same context. It's really like we operate on the spectrum with the elemental forces within us. So we can go on either side because, as I said before, with the example of Oshun, we have that loving side of Oshun, we have that jealous side of Oshun. With Ogun, we have that warrior energy that's innovative in all of these other aspects, but then we also have that really fiery aspect of Ogun that doesn't know how to manage anger well, etc. So that's still the elemental forces operating within us. Those are not the evil forces that are operating with us, though they may seem evil. But if you get on either side of that spectrum, you are going to manifest some things that will be evil, probably. So that's how it goes. It's still like it's still that same energy. It's not like you are evil. You have the propensity for evil, yeah, if you allow that aspect of you to take over. But we are not inherently or innately evil within ourselves. And I'm going to get to that as well, but that's a really good question. You're saying here is like different reflections of a light. Yes, like the sun and its rays. Absolutely. Yeah. those rays, you're going to have different branches, and each one does something different. So I hope I answered your question there. Definitely. It's a great question. Like, we we are responsible ultimately for handling our own behavior. However, IFA provides aids, assistance, and guidance in helping us to maintain and to stay on track. This is one of the reasons why we're constantly doing the sacrifices, the offerings, and the prayers, and the incantations, and everything that we do in the tradition. So, as I said before, these forces are part of cosmic order. They're there. They have to be there, and we gotta just deal with them, right? How do we manage them? We are giving offerings to the ancestors, to the Orishas, in order to help us also to maintain our ethical behavior, our own walking evil pellet. But those forces are the ones that help us overcome these evil forces. That's why we even appease the Orishas and the other forces that we appease, the ancestors. Ancestors are a form of Orishas, but I say them separately because they're part of your direct bloodline. So you are going to work with these forces, you appease them, they fight for you on your behalf. That's how that works. You do not appease the Ajogun. You don't give them offerings unless you're working with them directly, which I advise against, right? I'm not telling anybody to go and do that, because when you do, and I'm going to get to that shortly, you're going to cause yourself more problems than you probably want in a lifetime. But we don't feed them directly. We feed the Orishas so the Orishas can go and work on our behalf. You're saying here, can you tell us how Egbe helps us and how to appease them as a non-initiate? Absolutely, great question. Your Egbe, those are your astral mates. So they work directly with you just like any other force. They're going to be close to you. So you'll always tell people, focus on your Ori, your ancestors, your Egbe when you first get into the tradition, actually throughout the rest of your life, because these are the closest entities to you. These are your guides or what have you. So your Egbe are here to help ensure that you do not return to Orun, that's heaven, ashamed. They are here to help you fulfill your destiny. They're like your closest friends and relatives here on the earth, right? So think about it. Whenever you are having challenges or problems here on earth, the first people you go to, you might, depending on your age range or what have you, might go directly to your parents or a sibling or your best friend or your closest workmate or what have you, or even your husband, your wife. I forgot those dynamics as well. So those are the first individuals you're going to go to for help oftentimes before you reach out beyond them. And it can be in a number of ways. Like, you could actually need physical help. It could be money. You could need help moving somewhere, or it could be emotional support or just, psychological support. That's the same way or similar way your Egbe will help you out. As far as feeding your Egbe, anybody can feed their Egbe. Anybody should be feeding their Egbe, appeasing them. How do you do that? Traditionally, you are going to feed them the sacrifices and the offerings that they accept according to traditional protocol, right? So I'm not saying you just go out and you read something online and say this is what Egbe takes, and you go and you just try to feed these forces on your own. That's not the way it's done in tradition. There are other ways, right, for appeasing Egbe too. Like, if you're the type, especially if you like give gifts to children and you work with other people, you're really kind, and you give gifts to the homeless and things like that, that could actually be part of an offering that comes up for you in order to appease your Egbe. So you can do those types of things on your own. You don't have to have a reading to do that. Like, it's going to help you in either way. That being said, that's not the only way to feed your Egbe. So it's like you might go out and do those things, and excuse me, you may not see the results that you're looking for fully, because your Egbe may be calling for like a goat or a chicken or something like that according to tradition. I hope I got that answer for you. You're saying are egg based similar to what New Age spirituality would call spirit guides. In some cases, yes. A lot of times, like they'll refer to it as they call it your astral mates. They use that terminology too, astral mates. So like they could in the New Age spirituality, they'll say your what is it? Your soulmate. That's what I'm trying to like your soulmate and this type of thing. And that could be like somebody that you're closely connected to, a really close friend, or it could be a lover or something like that. Somebody that you were destined to meet, and you guys share this common bond or what have you. So yeah, a lot of times it is. But sometimes when they say spirit guides in the New Age traditions, or you call that a tradition, and what do you call it, in the New Age religions or spirituality formats or what have you, sometimes when they say spirit guides, they're actually talking about orishas, right? So you kind of have to watch what the language is around it, because I've heard people call spirit guides and they're actually talking about the archetypal energy of, let's say, Ogun or Eshu or another force. And I can tell based on what they're saying around the context of the conversation. So definitely. Asaju, good to see you. Good to see you. I was wondering where you were. Okay. You said online can jack you up. Yeah. Reading online can really mess you up when you're trying to discover things about the tradition, even unfortunately books and things like that now, because some people are using AI, which basically just collates all of the information online, and it gets it so wrong in many cases because it's pulling information from so many different sources and giving you an answer based on that. Because I've had a number of people come to me and they'll give me some AI response and like, is this true? And I'm like, no, partially it's usually partially true. I will give it that. But it's usually not 100% true, because what it does is it's pulling information from so many different sources. And so you have the different aspects of the tradition, the Isheshe from Nigeria, and then you have like the Lukumi and the Santeria and the Apollo and all of these other, derivatives of the tradition. So AI will come and pull everything together. And then unfortunately, some people decide to put that into a book and tell people that's the reality. You said, I have to work the land, be of service to it. Yes. It's good for anybody to, I'm not necessarily work the land, but be of service. That is one way you are going to just naturally appease your Egbe. You're saying, or Egbe, oh, I already read that question. Okay. So, yes, moving forward, these are the ways that we can definitely manage them. So as I said before, if you decide you want to go work with some evil forces, some people absolutely do this, right? This is not part of Ifa tradition. We do not go and appease evil forces in the tradition. We appease the elemental forces. We appease our ancestors, our Igbe, our Ori, etc., in order for those forces to work for us and to fight for us on our behalf in the spiritual realm. That's how that works. Okay, it's similar to like you think about war in real life, right? So you got two countries at war. Well, how are the different countries protected? They send in their military forces to go and fight the military of the other country. We don't go and like send money or gifts or things like that to the other country in order to appease them personally. We send in our warriors so that they can fight on our behalf. That's how that goes. Another question I received is, can someone sell their soul? So in Ifa, that is not part of the conversation, not part of the dialogue. All right. It's not a belief that you can go and, somebody can either take your destiny or you can swap your destiny out or trade it, or it can be permanently given away or something like that. That being said, you can absolutely forego or lose your destiny, not fulfill your destiny. I'll say it that way, not lose it, but you cannot fulfill your destiny if you decide to align yourself with dark forces, which some people do. So that's, when you want to go and you want to give sacrifices unto these evil forces and make contracts with them, usually you're going to be perpetually misaligned with your destiny, depending on the level that you go in with that type of activity. All right, because there are some high level rituals, some high level things that people do, they can do, and they absolutely do, which unfortunately leaves them misaligned for life. That means they cannot capture their destiny, they cannot fulfill it. Most of the time, it just comes with the very act of them engaging with that type of activity. When they decide to make a contract or a pact to do certain types of things in order to get things faster, because that's normally what happens. They want to, usually it's money. They want money, they want status, they want power, etc. And so they go and they make these contracts with evil forces, and they start feeding those evil forces. In those cases, they feed them regularly. They have to, right? And usually they feed them with other humans, or they'll feed them through vile acts, right? Where they go and they force themselves on someone else, or they hurt someone else, or they engage in certain types of sexual behaviors and things like that. So, yes, unfortunately, people do engage in that. It is not beneficial, it is no good outcome to it, but that doesn't mean that they sold their soul according to the Ifa tradition. Now, some other traditions do believe in this concept. Voodoo, it does believe in this concept, but not in Ifa. All right, so the curses, they exist, all right, but they're governed by the notion of cosmic justice. There is a space where you can go and you can do things where it's kind of the point of no return. You're beholden to those dynamics for the rest of your life and even in the afterlife, and even so, they can impact your family. That's what we get into the witchcraft, the black magic, those types of things. And I do plan on doing a separate episode about that in the future, in the upcoming weeks or so. So harmful actions, obviously, they're going to provoke some type of negative consequences, but you can. And I'm not talking about when we go to that level of black magic and witchcraft. I'm just talking about everyday things that we do, maybe to offend somebody, or we get out of alignment with our own destiny. We violate our taboos and things like that. You can do spiritual work to correct that and get back into alignment, so you're not forever condemned when you go down that path. So, how does Ifa view moral accountability? All right. As I said before, nobody is considered inherently evil. You don't come into this earth in sin, right? As you see in the Christian dynamic, you come into this earth with a propensity to do good and evil, to perpetuate both positive and negative actions. That doesn't mean that you are innately or inherently evil. However, there are evil forces that can provoke you, that can influence you at a higher level. Some people may be more so oriented to being influenced or overtaken by those forces due to a number of factors, but that doesn't make them like just pre-wired to, come into this earth, for instance, and be a murderer. Because I know that science teaches that sometimes. That's not it. Nobody's predestined to do evil, right? But there are certain factors that will influence a person more towards that scenario than to other people. Sometimes that will come through, like the bloodline, things that have happened, things that their ancestors have done. Some of it is in the food and the water that we drink. And there are other things that cause misalignment. And even going back to what I was saying, like somebody engaging in black magic or juju and those types of things, bringing it forward from generation to generation. So let's say the previous generation engaged in that, the next generation over has more of a propensity to engage in that type of behavior as well. You're saying, are you familiar with Agni can run, and can you expound on it? A family member is having some trouble, and I got that sign in her reading. I am not familiar with it right off. Can run. I have to look that up. I'm not familiar with it right off. However, if you came in a reading, right, you want to go back to that person, because I don't explain Odu that come up in other people's reading, because there's more to it than just saying this is what this Odu means. You got to see what it means for her in her particular situations, because in her situation, because there are certain things that need to be checked specifically for that person. So two people can get the same Odu, but there can be different manifestations of things within that based on what comes out. So it's not like two people get that same Odu and it's the exact same for everybody. 100%. There has to be some additional checking. So I hope you understand that. Can I speak on animal sacrifice? So explain what do you mean by animal sacrifice? I should be able to speak on it, but I need to know what aspects of it do you want to know about it? What specific questions do you have related to it? So going back to it, you can put that in the chat window and I'll try to get back to you soon. Moral accountability, that is managed through your ori, your own head. That's what your ori is, right? And your sense of responsibility. You are held accountable for your own action unless you are mentally incompetent. So that's kind of mental health issue. That's completely different. And obviously the spiritual forces understand that. So in that case, you're not 100% accountable for your actions if you don't know what you're doing. But if you are competent, if you are capable of understanding, there's no devil that you can just, give the blame to. The devil made me do. You can't just do that. That's not how it works. All right. I did get asked this question about Ifa reading. So does EB mean that one is completely morally corrupt? So to put it in context, when we are talking about this concept, when you get an E5 reading, it can come in two dispositions, all right, E-Ray or EB, which can indicate your moral position. Likely it does, right? What's going on with you? So when we get a reading that comes in E-Ray, that is the blessings, the success, the positive outcome. So that basically comes by a person typically walking in gentle character, having spiritual discipline, staying in alignment with their destiny for the most part. That doesn't mean that they don't do anything wrong, but for the most part, they are aligned. But when you see EB come out in a reading, these are negative outcomes, right? Illness, loss, death, setbacks, things like that. It indicates that that person is usually significantly out of balance. Or it could also mean that they have a whole lot of spiritual or negative, heavy attacks coming against them, usually at a very high level, even if they're not necessarily walking out of alignment on their own. They could have gotten caught up for whatever reason with somebody who is dealing with a whole lot of dark magic and dark aspects against them. Absolutely. So you're saying self accountability. Absolutely. You gotta be accountable. It's not, oh, the devil, this and that. It's your own doing or undoing that's going to get to you. You said, why is sacrifice needed and why do it need to be done by a Baba? So sacrifice balances things out. That's that blood, that life force comes through. If you're familiar with the Bible, um, there's this concept of the scapegoat, right? So the scapegoat is used to atone, and this is any animal. I'm saying goat, but the concept of goat refers to any animal that is used to atone for any misdeeds that you have done or for correcting anything that is out of balance in your life, even is not from your own misdoing, because everything isn't from our own misdoing. It could be from our lineage. It could be from, again, somebody just trying to bring evil against us. So that's what that does. The elbow is there to balance those dynamics out, to balance out the energy. It's done by a babalawo or an Ianifa because they understand the traditional protocol. So you don't just go and say, even if you get a reading and it comes back that you need to give certain sacrifices and offerings to certain Orisha, unless you're trained in that, you don't just go and take and give a cock to issue on your own because you probably don't know exactly what you're doing. And so in that case, you're just shedding animal blood for no reason. So you need to know, the proper way to even slaughter the animal, the proper incantations that go along with it. So many other methods. This is not something you just do on your own. You said, are animals needed for Ebo? Absolutely. So Ebo is the sacrifice in Ifa 9 times out of 10, say 9.99 times out of 10, it is going to come with an animal sacrifice. I've seen sometimes when Ebo did not require animal sacrifice, but it wasn't, I take that back, it wasn't a full on Ifa reading, it was a spiritual investigation. So a spiritual investigation can oftentimes lead to like non Ebo type of things. But when you get full on Idafa will always come with an animal sacrifice. So, yes, it does. Hope that answered your question. If you have any more questions, guys, definitely let me know. We're gonna move forward now. Does Ifa teach the concept of karma? Another question that I got. So definitely every action leads to consequences, whether they be good or bad, but it's not the same thing as karma in the way that we think of it as presented in the Eastern traditions, like the Hinduism and things like that, right? So karma, that notion refers to moral debt that's accumulated over lifetime. So you can leave this earth now, and then when you come back, as anything. It could be an animal, it could be another human, it could be, any other living force, right? When you come back, then you may have to pay for your misdeeds in the next lifetime. That's what karma looks like, okay? But in Ifa, we're emphasizing you got to pay in this lifetime. Nine times out of 10, you're going to pay in this. You're still going to pay in this lifetime for your misdeeds unless you just did something right before you transition, right? But you can't come back to the earth and still be like, dealing with some of that debt from the past life. But when you come back into this earth, you're going to come back as another human. You're going to come back through your own lineage, through your own bloodline. And everybody that comes back as an ancestor from the ancestor realm, I should say, you are always going to be coming back to help reconcile and heal your lineage, right? Whether that looks like you coming back and, taking care of some things that you did right before you left, because that could be a reality for some people, but it's still based on your deeds or what have you. And this is not about like you coming back as another species and that's your punishment, right? So this lifetime you're a human, the next lifetime you're an ant, and then you get squashed or something like that. That's not the belief in the Ifa tradition when it relates to the concept of cause and effect, if you guys get me there. Now we're going to look at some of the teachings on the notion of redemption when it comes to the tradition. So, breaking your taboos, right, or disregarding any type of spiritual warnings that you get can absolutely lead in imbalance. They most likely will, because they're in place for a purpose. So likely you'll experience misfortunes or obstacles. And to put this in context for people who maybe new and don't know anything about Ifa, when you're talking about taboos, they're not always what you would consider to be something negative, right? You could have a taboo that's related to not eating a certain type of food, as I've explained before. So you're not supposed to be eating this particular type of food, and you eat it anyway, knowingly or unknowingly, because it could happen where you eat and you don't know that you're doing so. And it could result in negative effects for you, right? So in that case, you're still going to experience those things. But it's not like you are condemned for the rest of your life when that happens. All right. So whenever you do commit anything that you do, nothing is, aside from working with black magic. I'm gonna say this, aside from working with like black magic, the juju, the witchcraft, and things like that, because you can get to some really high levels in those practices that can, cause some situations where you are not going to be able to easily redeem yourself. And again, I'll get into that conversation in another episode, right? um you can commit wrongdoings, right? Serious atrocities and things like that, and still be accepted by Ifa. Again, if you're just doing these things on your own, I'm not talking about you going and eliciting the help of evil to do this in a ritualistic way. um we don't excommunicate people, right? You do something wrong, you murder, you steal, you commit adultery, whatever it may be, you're not going to be excommunicated or shunned according to the tradition. Even when you violate your own taboos and things like that, that's not how it works. There is absolutely redemption available, and that redemption is going to come through sacrifice for sure. All right. You're going to give your Igbo. You could need to take some spiritual medicine. You may be required or recommended to take some spiritual medicine, especially if you've done some really egregious things, because the spiritual medicine can help to cleanse that evil and that negativity off of you. Obviously, behavioral modification is going to be a major part of it as well. So it's not like you just go and you give your offerings and your sacrifices and things like that, and you just continue in that behavior and you just keep giving offers and sacrifices. That's not how that works either. Like, true redemption is about stopping the behavior. All right. Same thing in Christianity with the notion of repentance. If you repent, it's not like just saying I repent and then you go back the next day and do the exact same thing. You want to discontinue the behavior if you want to walk in, if you want a good life, I should say that. If you want your life to be calm and not always stressed and having negative outcomes or what have you. All right. So another question I received: what happens if I don't do the sacrifices after I get a reading? You know, failing to complete the sacrifices is not a good thing. This is why I always say, be prepared for that part of the reading, even if it's in part, right? You may be able to start it off and do it over time. I usually don't recommend going longer than 2 months with that process, but don't start this process unless you are ready for that part of it. Obviously, your situation will most likely stay the same, or it could get worse. It's going to be unresolved. That's how it goes if you don't do the elbow, if you don't do the sacrifices. That's the reality of it. That's why you get Idafa in the first place, right? Idafa, Ifa divination, or Ifa reading. This is not just about getting information. This is not a psychic reading. There are other types of readings you can get for that, even within the tradition. So I've discussed that before. So you guys can check out my there's a live stream that we did on the YouTube channel about like Ifa divination, Ifa readings, or something like that. I can't recall the name of it. I might pin it to in the comment section on this video. But you can go and get another type of reading. You can get an ancestor reading. You can do a spiritual investigation if you want a reading that's rooted in the tradition. Okay. But Ifa divination, Idafa, that is not a psychic reading. It is not meant to be taken in the same way as a psychic reading is done. You say, I love being within the Ifa tradition. It requires reflection and change 1000%. And thank you for saying it. Unfortunately, a lot of times people think that the sacrifices and the offerings are going to do everything for you. They do a lot and they are very, very beneficial, but you still have to self-reflect and do the work yourself as well. Close what you open 100%. That comes with the sacrifice. You open that door, you want to go ahead and close it. You close it in the Ifa tradition through the sacrifices and offerings. If that's not something that you believe in or that you don't want to do, The sacrifices in particular, because a lot of times people have issues with that because of the animal blood, then the Ifa tradition is likely not for you. You might want to go and try something that you believe in or that meshes with your level of consciousness at that particular time. You're saying it was the ancestor veneration video. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So I'm sure I did talk about that too in there because I talked about the ancestor readings in there. But I do have another video too that it was something about Ifa readings. I have to get back to it, but something about Ifa readings in particular, because I laid out the different types of readings that are common within the tradition. Because most people just hear Idafa or Ifa divination and they think that that's the only type of reading that you can do. That is the most common type of reading. That is a resolute reading where you are going to get information on how to resolve your issues, but it's not the only type of reading, and it's actually not recommended if you're not ready to follow through with the Ebo. All right, Ifa teachings on the afterlife. So let's let's look at this aspect of it. So Ifa does not have a concept of hell or eternal damnation either. So it's not like when you die, you're going to hell and that's it. You're going to burn for all eternity. The concept is nonsensical in and of itself, right? That you just forever burn, because that's not even possible. But irrespective of that, we're referring to it from, excuse me, guys. We're looking at it from the perspective of Ifa, and the tradition focuses on balance, legacy building, continuity, right? Even so, going in cycles. That's what Ifa teaches. So you are likely to return to the earth. Now, there is a concept of the Arun Apati in the Yoruba culture, right? It's not necessarily Ifa culture, it's Yoruba culture instead. And it kind of describes somebody being like the heaven within the heaven of Potsherd. But this is not hell, so to speak. It's very similar to the Catholic notion of purgatory, right? Where you're kind of in between because you haven't done good deeds and things like that. It represents that state of being spiritually disconnected, or having a dishonorable ancestral legacy, but not like you just being tortured forever and ever. Amen. Okay. Many scholars, many people view this concept as a colonial era corruption, right? That it was added or misinterpreted based on the Christian influence of the missionaries that were coming into the region at the time. And so some people kind of adopted this concept of this purgatory, if you will, and it's not the same. So it kind of depends on the lineage that you work with as far as whether this will be taught as a reality or not. Okay. Instead, typically we look at it from the perspective that when somebody transitions, the soul goes to the ancestral realm if the person lived an honorable life. All right. That means they passed away at a ripe old age. They built a legacy, usually through their own children, but it doesn't always have to be through their own biological children. As I've explained before, there are other ways to build a legacy as well. So that is typically what people are going to teach about in the tradition. Again, there are some corruptions based on Western influence. Aside, you're saying facts, alien, BG. I don't know what that means. Can you explain for me? Alrighty. People who commit serious wrongdoings may become restless in the afterlife, right? This is common if they transition and they haven't reconciled things, they didn't live out their destiny, especially, right? So their legacy oftentimes will be erased or neglected by the living in their within their heritage or what have you. And so this is not considered to be good within the Ifa tradition. Like if you're not remembered, you're not an ancestor of sorts. and that's never considered a good thing. Oh, you were talking to alien black girl. Okay, I got you. You was telling her his facts. Thank you for that. Okay. All righty. Sorry about that, guys. So there is right a proposition that you may not be able to be okay when you transition. You may be wondering, your soul may not be at rest or what have you, especially if you don't have that continual legacy within your family line. So you want to be careful to leave a good legacy, right? You want to live a good life, all right? Without that remembrance, without your perpetual legacy, it means that your soul can't fully actualize in the ancestral realm, all right, or positively influence your lineage. And that's not what you want. We always want to be of service to our lineage, because you got to think you might come back on this earth, right, once you transition, and you want to be taken well care of. So this is one of the reasons why we take care of our ancestors. I definitely believe that a lot of what we suffer from today throughout the African diaspora is because we haven't taken care of our ancestors. We have a lot of ancestors who are upset, who are stuck, who are not well situated. This happens a lot because we haven't been taking care of them. A lot of this is manifesting in the problems that we see today. Even so, a lot of the mental health issues, even the autisms and all of those types of things. Definitely, I know that there is some environmental things going on with that, but I do feel like even part of that, all levels of mental health, not even just that, but I'm using it as an example, is some of that stuck trauma from our ancestral heritage, right? It's getting stuck because our ancestors are saying, you're not taking care of us. Generation after generation, we have moved further away from our traditions because we came through slavery, through the colonization efforts. We came into Christianity and other forms of religion. We stopped taking care of our ancestors, and now we're not walking down that path of destiny. We're just living to fulfill somebody else's dream and somebody else's goal. And it's a lot of people who are getting sick nowadays, and that's the ancestors even so waking us up, saying you need to do something, because if you don't, we're not going to be able to even return back to where we were before. Alafia, and welcome everybody who is coming. So we do have to think about it. A lot of health conditions. It's not even just the mental illness. A lot of the diabetes, the heart conditions, and all of that. I really feel like that's that energy of trauma that is stuck in our ancestral lineage, and it needs to be healed. It needs to be removed from us. And until somebody takes up that charge or what have you, and do what they need to do, we're just going to continue to degenerate as a people, right? And as a society holistically. You're asking, how can you tell if an ancestor is at peace or not? You can do that through an ancestor reading, right? They can tell you if where your ancestor is. So we call upon your ancestors. The quicker that they respond, the better they are situated, because that means that they're close to you. If it takes them a long time to respond, or if they don't respond at all, they are not well situated. But you can get a reading to determine how well your ancestors are situated. All right, so before birth, each person chooses destiny and cosmic order. Sorry, I didn't introduce the section. So we're going to talk about destiny and cosmic order. And this is actually the last thing that I have planned for this live stream. So guys, if you have any more questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll get to them before we close out. Okay, so it said before birth, everybody chooses their own destiny. Before Olodumare, which is the supreme being, and Orunmila, which is what we call Ifa, witnesses. A lot of times people get confused because when I say Ifa, and I'm oftentimes referring to, I can either be referring to the tradition or Orunmila, and this is a commonality, especially in this Isheshe. And so a lot of people get confused there. So sometimes when you say Ifa, you're referring to Orunmila. That's why we say Ifa divination or Idafa. That is going to talk when the owl goes and speaks to Arumula and pulls down information related to your destiny. All right. So that's already been sorted before you come to the earth. You choose that. You still have free will, though. When you come to the earth, you don't have to fulfill your destiny. Not fulfilling your destiny, you're probably going to be miserable. You probably won't enjoy life. You're probably going to suffer a lot in life. Again, I feel like that's why a lot of us are suffering. African Americans, African diaspora, excuse me for that, the African diaspora as a whole, because many people are not walking the path of their destiny because they don't even know their destiny. And so we have to get back in touch with that reality because we're fulfilling somebody else's goal, somebody else's dream. We're working for other people still as slaves to fulfill their agenda, to build up their workforce, to build up their dreams, etc., instead of us doing what we need to be doing. All right. You have the choice to make, and you should make it wisely, obviously. Poor character, walking out of evil Pele, that right there can definitely hinder you from fulfilling your destiny. Even if you have a beautiful destiny, which many people do, oftentimes they're out of alignment with it, so they never get an opportunity to completely fulfill their destiny. All right, that happens so many times when people get readings like you're destined to do X, Y, Z, and the person is like, "Well, this looks nothing like my life right now," and that's because they're so far removed from where they should be. Aside, you're asking if you get an ancestor reading about a particular family member you've been told has passed, but they're actually still alive. What would be the reading? What would be the reading say in that situation? It's interesting. So I don't know. I mean, if they're still alive, I don't know. Hopefully, the reading would tell you that the person is deceased, right? But it depends on how everything plays out. So you could be asking about an ancestor and they have the same name as another ancestor who is deceased, because that is very, very common to name people the same thing in the lineage. And so maybe the person starts calling on the ancestor and that person does come through because a person with that same name from your lineage is deceased. So it could be that, but I don't know otherwise. Our Dissa, if you see this question, if you're still here, could you provide more guidance on it? It's an interesting question. So we'll see if he's still here, if he can provide some guidance on that. If not, we'll try to get back with you. Okay. So let's see. What was I saying? Okay. Yes. So I said you got to go ahead and try your best to live the best you can possibly live if you want to truly fulfill your destiny. And okay, you're saying I know of a situation where a mother lied to a child about their father. Yes, that can be very, very tricky. So again, it could be that situation if they had the same name. Hopefully, the reading will reveal that the person is actually not dead. A lot of times it will. That's an interesting question, very interesting concept. I would like to explore that more. It is interesting. You're asking here on IG, can Ifa help me find my ancestors outside of Yoruba land? Um, an Ifa reading. So if you're asking, like, can you come to Ifa and just ask, who are my ancestors outside of Yoruba land? No, that's not how the reading works. If you have like specific questions, like, are my ancestors from a specific location? Like, do I have ancestry from Ghana, for instance, or something like that? Yes, those types of questions can be answered, but it has to be specific. So IFA is not an intuitive reading where we're going to go through and just, pull information and say, yeah, you got lineage from, you know, Saudi Arabia, for instance, right? You can ask specific questions to see if you do have lineage from those places. But again, you're going to have to be specific with your questioning. It has to be tight, and somebody can help you to navigate that process of how to put the question together if you have that level of specificity. Okay, especially like maybe you got a DNA test or something and you want to verify is this correct. You could do something like that. Yeah. Um, Failing to align with your aura leads to repeated obstacles, guys, repeated setback, loss of your blessings, stagnation, all of those different things. This is often described as what we call living in hell, right? So you probably won't have a good life experience if you are constantly misaligned with your aura. You're going to suffer a great deal. So you have to be very, very wary of not walking along your destiny path. Eva is there to help you to stay in alignment through the ritual work. The elbow helps to balance things out so you can get your situation back on track. All right. Spiritual medicine can help you in that regard as well. And also the cultivation of Iwe or good character. You are very welcome. What is it? RME dot two deuces three. I think I said it right. You're very, very welcome. So, guys, that's all I do have for you in this live stream. If you are ready to align with your destiny, address any challenges that you may be facing, feel free, guys, to go ahead and schedule a personal EFI reading with me. Asanee 44. The readings are handled out of Nigeria by our Adissa. We handle all of our ritual work there as well. If you're ready to take that next step, if you have questions specifically about how I like to frame your questions or what you can ask, just reach out to me on IG at Asanee44. The next live stream, all right, so in 2 weeks from now, I plan to cover a lot of the Ori FAQs that I've been getting. So we're going to do a really wide net, so to speak, about Ori. And I'll also send out a filler with the survey on YouTube and also on IG to get more questions that you guys may have about, Ori, working with Ori and things like that. Okay. Odupe. Okay, you're very, very welcome. So thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Yes, 2 weeks. 2 weeks beside you. Thank you all for coming. Feel free, guys, to reach out to me at Asanee44 on IG if you have additional questions. You can also put them in the chat, on YouTube, rather, because this will be available on YouTube. So put them in the comment sections if you have additional questions. Mercury retrograde. Mercury is in retrograde, so I'm having problems with my speech today. But either way, I bid you all farewell. Ashe. Guys, please have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond.